Ferrari spent millions building the most aggressive upgrade package of the entire Formula One season. 11 new parts, a secret rear wing nobody else dared to copy, a car that suddenly gained almost 10 kilometers per hour on the straights. And somehow, it made the internal crisis even worse. Because after Miami, hidden data started exposing something Ferrari did not want the world to see. The upgrades worked. The speed was real. The problem was far more dangerous. Lewis Hamilton publicly turned against Ferrari's simulator. Engineers were reportedly seeing behavior on track that completely contradicted the virtual models. And now insiders believe Ferrari may have spent months developing a car based on the wrong information. Think about that for a second. What happens when one of the biggest teams in Formula One no longer trusts the very system guiding the entire project? Because this is no longer just about a bad strategy call or one disappointing race weekend. This could explain why Ferrari keeps getting faster and still keeps losing. And the most shocking part of all is what the Miami footage and telemetry reportedly revealed behind closed doors. Subscribe to the channel, because by the end of this story, Ferrari's real problem looks much bigger than anyone imagined. Ferrari did not arrive in Miami looking for small improvements. They arrived desperate to stop the season from slipping away before summer even started. Because inside Maranello, there was already a growing fear that the SF26 was falling behind too quickly. Not everywhere, not in every corner, but in the areas that decide races. Straight line efficiency, race execution, and worst of all, confidence. That's why Miami mattered so much. This was supposed to be the reset weekend, the moment Ferrari finally proved the project was alive. And at first, the signs looked incredibly promising. The team brought upgrades to more than half the car. Not cosmetic changes, not tiny adjustments hidden under the bodywork. Major aerodynamic surgery. The most important piece was the rear wing internally nicknamed Macarena. And honestly, the concept sounded almost dangerous from start. Unlike a normal rear wing, this one could partially rotate under certain conditions to reduce drag dramatically on straights. Imagine an airplane wing suddenly changing shape while flying at full speed. That is the level of ambition Ferrari was attempting. The goal was simple: make the SF26 stop fighting against the air. Earlier in the season, Ferrari's biggest weakness was painfully obvious. The car generated too much resistance at high speed. The drivers could attack corners aggressively, then immediately lose time on the straights. It was like carrying a backpack full of bricks during a sprint, and Miami's layout made that weakness impossible to hide. Long acceleration zones, heavy braking sections, repeated traction demands. If Ferrari failed here, it would expose a much deeper limitation in the project. But then something unexpected happened. The numbers started improving almost immediately. Ferrari reportedly gained around 10 kilometers per hour on the straights with the new rear wing package. That is not a small gain. In Formula One, teams sometimes spend months searching for just 1 or 2 kilometers per hour. Ferrari found far more than that in a single package. And suddenly, people inside the paddock started paying attention, because the SF26 no longer looked slow. In fact, through medium and slower corners, the car looked genuinely competitive. The redesigned floor improved rear stability under braking. The front wing balanced the airflow more effectively. Everything finally seemed connected. And this is where the story becomes uncomfortable for Ferrari, because the more the car improved, the more obvious another problem became. The upgrades were functioning. The speed was there. So why was the team still collapsing when it mattered most? And inside the garage, one detail was already starting to create serious tension. Lewis Hamilton did not trust what he was seeing from the simulator. That tension did not appear overnight. It had been building quietly for weeks. Because behind the scenes, Ferrari's simulator was already becoming a source of frustration inside the team. And Miami exposed the problem in the worst possible way. Lewis Hamilton arrived at the circuit expecting one car and found another completely different. That sounds small, but in Formula One, it changes everything. Before every race weekend, drivers spend countless hours inside simulators preparing setups. Brake balance, ride height, aerodynamics, corner behavior. The simulator is supposed to predict reality, is basically a virtual version of the race weekend before the cars even touch the track. And for top teams, that system becomes the foundation of development. Now imagine preparing for an exam using the wrong textbook. You study for days. You memorize the answers. Then the real questions arrive and nothing matches. That is exactly how Hamilton described Ferrari's situation after Miami. According to his own comments, he would create setups in the simulator, arrive at the Real circuit, and immediately discover the car behaved differently. The balance changed. The feeling changed. The setup logic stopped making sense. And this is where things become deeply worrying for Ferrari. Because when drivers stop trusting simulator data, engineers lose one of the most important tools in modern Formula One. Development slows down. Confidence disappears. Every decision suddenly becomes harder. But here's the detail most fans completely missed. Hamilton was not just criticizing one bad setup. He was questioning the correlation of the entire system. Correlation is one of the most important concepts in Formula One engineering. It simply means this. Does the virtual car behave like the real car? If the answer is yes, engineers can develop aggressively. If the answer is no, every upgrade becomes a gamble. And according to multiple reports after Miami, Ferrari's simulator may already be sending the team in the wrong direction. That is terrifying when you remember something critical. Every single Miami upgrade was designed using simulator data first. The new floor, the front wing, the Macarena rear wing, everything depended on virtual modeling before reaching the track. So now Ferrari faces a brutal paradox. The upgrades worked, but maybe they should have worked even better. And that possibility changes the entire story of Ferrari's season. Because if the simulator is inaccurate, Ferrari may not actually know the true potential of its own car. And suddenly, another question starts spreading through the paddock. How many development mistakes has Ferrari already made without realizing it? And that question becomes even more dangerous once you look at what was happening inside the garage during the Miami weekend itself. Because while Ferrari engineers were trying to understand the car, their rivals were already moving ahead. Mercedes looked calmer, more precise, more predictable. McLaren kept extracting pace consistently. And Ferrari, despite finally having a faster car, still looked unstable under pressure. That contradiction frustrated people inside the paddock immediately. How could a team spend months developing upgrades, finally make the car competitive, and still leave the weekend feeling defeated? The answer may have nothing to do with raw speed. It may be about trust, because Formula One drivers do not just drive fast. They drive based on instinct. And instinct disappears the moment the car becomes unpredictable. One lap the rear feels stable. The next lap the balance shifts unexpectedly. One setup works in simulation. The next day it stops working on track. That destroys confidence little by little. And confidence is everything at this level, especially for Lewis Hamilton. Remember, Hamilton spent years at Mercedes working with one of the most respected simulator programs in Formula One. He became used to correlation accuracy at the highest level. So when he arrived at Ferrari and started seeing different behavior between simulation and reality, the contrast hit him immediately. But here's where the story gets even more uncomfortable. Charles Leclerc did not react the same way. And that difference may reveal something very important about Ferrari's internal culture. Leclerc has been inside Ferrari since 2019. He has spent years adapting to the team systems, weaknesses, and inconsistencies. In other words, he may already know how much of the simulator to ignore. Hamilton does not have that instinct yet. So while Leclerc adjusts naturally, Hamilton keeps encountering surprises. And those surprises create friction. Not necessarily personal conflict, something potentially worse. Philosophical conflict. Because Hamilton comes from an environment where engineering precision was treated almost like religion. Ferrari historically operates differently. More emotional, more reactive, sometimes more chaotic under pressure. And Miami may have exposed that clash more clearly than ever before. Especially because Ferrari's strategic mistakes completely erase the advantage of the upgrades. That detail matters enormously. According to post-race analysis, Ferrari's improvements genuinely made the SF26 more competitive. But operational mistakes canceled much of the game. Think about how painful that is from a driver's perspective. You finally feel the car improving. You finally sense progress. And then strategy decisions destroy the opportunity anyway. That creates frustration extremely fast. And now the pressure heading toward Canada becomes enormous. Because Montreal is the kind of circuit where Ferrari's upgrades should shine even more. Long straights, late braking zones, aggressive acceleration sections. The exact environment where the Macarena rear wing was designed to dominate. But Ferrari now faces a terrifying possibility. What if they arrive in Canada with another setup direction based on unreliable simulator data? What if the car still behaves differently once practice begins? Because if that happens again, the problem stops looking temporary. It starts looking structural. And inside Formula One, structural problems can destroy entire seasons before teams even realize what is happening. And this is exactly why the next race could become one of the most important weekends Ferrari has faced in years. Not because Canada decides the championship, but because Canada may finally expose whether Ferrari truly understands its own car. That is the real fear inside this story. Because if Miami was only a strategy disaster, Ferrari can recover. If the engine is slightly weaker, upgrades can eventually reduce the gap. But if the simulator itself is misleading development, the entire foundation becomes unstable. And Formula One teams cannot survive long without reliable foundations. Every upgrade begins in simulation first. Every aerodynamic concept, every setup direction, every balance adjustment. The simulator is supposed to act like a compass. But what happens when the compass points north sometimes and south other times? That is the nightmare Ferrari may be entering right now. Especially because the 2026 regulations are far more complicated than previous years. The electrical systems now play a much larger role in overall car behavior, energy deployment, battery management, power delivery, and according to reports surrounding Ferrari's simulator issues, teams still do not fully understand how these systems behave under real race conditions, which means simulator models can drift away from reality very quickly. And suddenly, Ferrari's situation starts looking less like one isolated failure and more like a dangerous chain reaction. Because one inaccurate model affects everything connected to it. Aerodynamics, ride height, tire degradation, braking stability, energy deployment. It all overlaps. Imagine trying to build a skyscraper while the measurements of the foundation keep changing underneath you. Eventually, every new floor becomes harder to trust. And this is where the pressure on Ferrari's engineers becomes enormous. Because now they are trapped between two realities. The data says one thing, the drivers feel another. And when that happens in Formula One, politics start appearing very quickly. Drivers begin pushing for different setup philosophies. Engineers defend their numbers. Departments start protecting their own work. Nobody says it publicly, but the tension builds internally. And according to multiple reports after Miami, Hamilton already returned to the simulator immediately after the race weekend, trying to understand the mismatch himself. That detail matters more than people realize.